Hi everyone, if you're here from the previous video, this is going to show you how although there will be a little bit of, well, there won't be that much wastage, but instead of using, like in my previous video, making the most out of your A4 cardstock, to get a card that is slightly smaller than an American A2 size card. I know I go on about this, but I do love the American size, the A2 size of their card. It's not as, like our A6, which is the equivalent, sort of, is narrower and longer, and I can't work with a card like that. So the quick tips that are on my, or should be uploaded already, are showing you how to make the most using A4 cardstock, although the cards themselves will be slightly smaller. But this way I'm going to show you how I actually am going to use it going forward. And for the most part, this is how I use my A4 cardstock. To get an American A2 size card plus 2 layers, although they will all be the same colour. Once you've cut a couple of them, you'll have spare pieces, and this will make sense in a minute, hopefully. So I've got my A4 cardstock here. This is Daffodil Delight for Stampin' Up, and I'm just going to put down the length of the trimmer. I'm going to slide it in and cut it at 4 1/4. And those that don't know, an American A2 size card is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 when it's folded. So that's 4 1/4. I'm going to turn it sideways and cut it at 11, because our A4 cardstock is a bit longer, than the 8 1/2 by 11 cardstock that our American friends have. So that's the piece that you'll have as your base card. So this measures 4 1/4 by 11, and you'll fold it at 5 1/2. So that means the layer that needs to go at the first layer would be 4 inches. Yeah, 4 inches by 5 1/4. So with the piece that's left, this should already be at 4 inches, because although I will trim it to make sure it does actually measure 4 inches, but our A4 cardstock measures roughly 8 1/4 wide, rather than 8 1/2, which is what the American cardstock is. So this should be at, if it's ever so slightly wider than 4 inches. So I'm just going to trim it down to 4 inches. That's not going to make any difference for the second layer. So we've got 4 inches there. Oh, sorry. And we want it cut to 5 1/4. So that would be a layer on your card. It's probably hard to see on yellow, but it will give you a first layer. And then the piece that's left, I'm going to trim it again to the next size down, so it would be 3 3/4. Trim it off down, down the length of it. Turn it sideways, and this will then be at 5 inches. So out of one piece of A4, you can get the base of your card, an A2 size card, a first layer, and actually a second layer. Oh, if it will line up, it will line up, but and I'm not sure, I think you can probably see there, you've got all your layers there. So what I would do is I will cut the base card out, and then these two pieces, I'll have a little box where I'll have a divider. So I'll have, say, it's labelled 5 1/4 by 4 inches, and I'll pop the extra ones of these in there, and then 3 3/4 by 5, and I'll pop those in, because sometimes you might not want this layer, so you might want to go straight to the 5-inch piece and have a bigger border around this edge, just for something different. So I think that's quite handy to do, and that way the scrap that you do have, okay, you've got this tiny piece, but roughly A4 you should be able to get your 4 1/4 inch and a 4-inch wide piece, but otherwise this is a teeny tiny little thing you might have left. But really, this is the scrap that will be left from doing it this way. And as you build up your different cards and you make your different cards, you'll find you'll have extra pieces like this. And don't forget, doing tone on tone is a great way to use that sort of, this whole thing. So you could have, so in other words, you could have a yellow base. This one you could emboss, say, with an embossing folder, so you've got texture in the background, although you wouldn't really see it that much. And then you'd have another layer on top that maybe is stamped on in Daffodil Delight, so that it's all, you know, one, it's all the same colour, but it's got its own sort of unique thing of textures, and you can ink the edges and stuff like that, and it will stand out from the card itself. So that's my plan going forward. I was going to use, I'll just give you a sneak peek of the previous video if you haven't seen it. I was going to do this whole thing, but the cards are just too small for me. I know it's only like 1/4 of an inch. I mean, that's what we're talking about here. 1/4 of an inch makes a difference, for me anyway. So I prefer the American A2. So this for me is the way that I can get the least amount of waste out of one piece of cardstock, where I'm getting the size card I want and extra layers for another card, or the same one, depending how you want to do it. So I hope that was helpful too. I hope that as a, you know, proper, an actual demo, that was easier to understand. And like I say, you don't have a ton of wastage with it. I know we'll keep pieces like this because they'd be good on other cards as, you know, you could stamp a sentiment on there, or you could use it across, you know, if this was a different colour, you could use it across as a, almost like a band on it sort of thing. So yeah, so hope that was helpful. Hope that was another little trick that you might be able to use one day. And I will see you in the next video, guys. Bye!